So the Fischer Sozin attack in the Scheveningen is really similar to what we learned about the Najdorf. Usually we'll transpose from a Najdorf into a Scheveningen. There's a couple different variations, a couple different move orders and different lines that we should definitely look at and just see some different ways to play it. Okay, so the move order, I'm going to show the typical move order. This time I'm going to make the knight go to c6 because people who play the Sicilian, you can choose to play d6 or you can play knight to c6. This is actually a slightly older move, and almost all of the openings will transpose into the same exact lines, but it is common to see this move as well, so you can choose to mix it up sometimes. Instead of playing d6, you can play knight to c6. It avoids the bishop coming down if they want to and giving you a check, right? When you just play d6, they can make a check here, which doesn't matter because if you want to trade that bishop off or just block it with a knight, this is one of White's good pieces. So if they want to make a check and then trade that off, which is basically inevitable, if you block it and they don't take it, you can put the question to the bishop here with this pawn move. If he backs up, you can knock it back and it will be trapped. So he'll pretty much be forced to take either your knight or your bishop if you block with that. So we're not ever worried about this check move, in case you guys are wondering about that, right? If we play d6, he makes a check there, we block it, it doesn't matter. They're giving away a good piece for one of our undeveloped pieces, so it's a trade that doesn't make very much sense at all from White's point of view. Okay, so typical moves. We play the knight out, and notice one of the things about having this knight here is that it doesn't allow this pawn to come down and knock our knight off. That's one of the reasons why, as I explained before, we also oftentimes want to position the queen here. It's very flexible, it puts pressure on this file, and it defends from some of these pawn moves. And if a knight is able to come here and seemingly gain a tempo by threatening our queen, we just back it up and then knock the knight off. So they gain nothing by doing that, so we're not afraid of that. Remember in chess, if you see one move ahead and you see something that your opponent can do, like threaten one of your pieces and maybe making it move, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't make that move. In chess, we don't make assumptions. So that means that you got to calculate and see, okay, if he goes there, where can you put your piece? Are there any good forcing moves that can come out of that? We don't make any assumptions. You want to calculate every variation as far as you can. So that means at least 2 or 3 moves, at the very, very minimum, every single time you're thinking of a move. Look at least 2 or 3 moves from both you and your opponent into the future. Okay, so the Fischer Sozin attack we know is they take the bishop out because they want to bear down on f7. The best way to combat that is to play e6, and this is how in this move order we get into the Scheveningen because we are playing against that bishop. So that's why we're not going to play the Najdorf because the bishop is on c4. They'll use a regular continuation, get the bishop out, defend this knight, put that in a good spot, and we will play d6, which allows us to get our bishop out, and it guards this square. The reason that we play this move in the Sicilian is because we want to stop this pawn from coming down, and if we have the queen here, we have the knight here, we have the pawn here, we have 3 pieces defending this square. And so probably White's going to end up having to push this pawn and attack this square if they're not doing the English attack or Yugoslav attack with the queen on d2 and then castling long. As we briefly saw in a previous lecture, they're going to set up kingside, and they're going to play f4. Now, the move order here varies. Someone might be really aggressive and play f4 immediately, but the cost in doing this is they haven't developed their knight yet, which could end up being troublesome later. We want to develop all of our pieces. So instead of playing f4, someone can play the knight to c3 here first, allow us to castle, and then play f4. So it just depends. Again, you have to calculate. Every time you play this opening, even if it seems like the moves are all the exact same as before, there may be a slight change in move order. There may be one tiny difference that changes the position and allows a tactic or allows you to get a piece to a better square. Every single move in chess is important. And the reason people like Bobby Fischer rise to the very, very top ahead of even other grandmasters is because they make the absolute most of every single move. They make their moves efficiently. They do multiple things at the same time. They coordinate their pieces more harmoniously. They are choosing plans that are more effective, and you combine all of that together, and it makes for a winning combination. It's one of the things that makes chess so difficult. Anybody can learn the moves, and anybody can study it, but being able to defeat other strong players means you have to calculate better, you have to understand the openings better, and you have to make fewer mistakes. And that's what this is all about. Okay, so we'll play knight to c3 eventually. maybe we'll put the queen here. Again, we already learned that we're not worried in the Scheveningen, but then putting a knight on b5, we'll just tuck the queen back and then make that knight move and play a6. So it actually helps us. They think that they're gaining a tempo on our queen. We put into a good square. We're still defending this e5 square with the queen by being behind the pawn. And we're also allowing ourselves to, after we play a6, just look at it one more time. Go here, depending on what they do, maybe they're getting ready to bring their queen over to the attack position. We just make the knight move back. He's got nowhere to go. He's got to go back. So he gained nothing, and then we can gain a tempo on the bishop and expand there. And our queen's actually not in a bad spot right here, even though we usually want the queen and most of our pieces to be centralized. In this situation, it's doing some things that we'd like it to do, and he actually helped us right there with our development. So again, the theory here is that white's going to be attacking. Since we have this e5 square covered, at some point he's probably going to play f5. This is very typical. If you're white, you're going to want to look for ways to attack here, and if you're black, you're going to look for ways to defend. We have a pretty good defense as long as we're careful. And whenever it comes to these pawn trades, you simply have to calculate a lot, okay? We don't want to let him take this pawn here in this case because he's got 3 attackers and we only have 2 defenders, and after he takes, we take, he's going to win a pawn with an attack. So we'll either be forced to play e5, and maybe he'll trade off this knight, but then we'll have this backwards pawn. It probably isn't a good thing to do. As I've mentioned to you before, we usually want to relieve the pressure when we're playing defense and trade. So in this case, we'd probably want to trade it off. And even though it allows him to kind of get his pieces going and get his queen over here, we have time to defend. We can move our rook over maybe, and we can get our knight maybe to this nice square right here and defend. This is not such an easy attack for him now that he's traded it off. So, I mean, he does have some chances here, but the key for the attacker is to be patient, as I will keep telling you. So this premature f5 here may not have been a great idea. Probably it would have been better for white to continue to develop his pieces and for black to do the same before making the attack. Get pieces moved around to better squares. Look for a time when it's appropriate to make that pawn move. In the meantime, we can also advance our pieces. Or it may, depending on what they do, be appropriate for us to make a pawn move forward. Usually we don't want to do that. We want to keep it flush. We want to keep it solid. But if their attack's coming and it looks dangerous, based on our calculations, we might want to push a pawn forward and force some trades and some action and get this center open. Like, for example, if we're going here, they could close us down and go here, which is probably the best move. So we want to calculate that and think, okay, maybe that's not a good move. But we can calculate if takes, or in this case, actually we probably take our knight because it's not easily removed. And now we have our knight in a good square. And then if he tries to trade off the knights, we can put him in this nice defensive spot. So again, probably premature from white's point of view to open that up, although they still have some activity and pressure on this side. Every game is going to be different. They've got a lot of pieces on the side near our king. So this is going to be an interesting and fun game to play. We don't have such a bad position ourselves. We have some nice space on the queen side. We can also do some things, try to maybe trade the queens off. We can play d5 right here and threaten to trade queens. Anytime you're in the defensive position, which basically in the Scheveningen, you're automatically in the defensive position, pretty much in all Sicilians actually. It's a good idea sometimes to trade off queens and then go for a winning endgame. And it's just a good choice if you want to avoid having to play d5, e5 at the very beginning and everything like that. So let's go back to the beginning. I want to show you guys a couple other variations on this, on how it can play out. I showed you the knight to c6. This time we're going to play the old move, which is actually the newer move, but the move that's old to us in the class, so I'll be showing it to you. Make the trade, make the knight moves come out. He's going to play the Sozin, get the bishop out immediately. And at this point, the pawn's already on d6. We'll play e6 against the bishop. He might get that bishop out. We want to get our bishop out. And some people will just play f4 right here right away. just get that move in. Doesn't really matter. We have no threats. Black has no threats against white right now. I mean, we could make a check right here with the queen, but that would do nothing. I mean, he could literally just block it and make us move our queen back, or just put the knight there. So that doesn't really achieve anything for us. There's an old saying in chess: Patzer sees check, Patzer plays check. Right? We don't want to make a check just because there's a check. It doesn't necessarily do anything in this situation. We have to think about, is that the place that we want our queen to be? Do we want our queen to be on that square? Maybe we do, but if he just moves his bishop back to d2, we got to move it again. So it's kind of a wasted move. We'll just castle. And then he'll castle. And you have a transposition into the opening that we saw before. It's very, very similar. Now notice this time I move my knight first instead of my queen. And that slight change move order changes things. Because if he chooses to trade, now the position is different. If he chooses to take this knight and we take back with this pawn, now our pawn structure is different. We've got to open b file, which ends up actually usually being pretty good for black, because we can put a rook right here, and then if we trade off all the pieces, we've got a really good endgame pawn structure, and we'll have some pressure on the queen side. We will probably make him have to react by moving a rook over, moving his pawn down, and so trading this knight off usually for white is not a very good idea. Also, you'll notice this knight has moved twice. It's in the center of the board, which is where we want it. So it makes no sense for white to trade this knight for our knight, which we only moved once, and it's in almost a starting position. So if he trades that, it helps us. It hurts his position, it helps us. It makes no sense. White's the attacker with the initiative. It makes no sense for him to willy-nilly trade pieces. So you never want to worry about those types of trades. Okay? We can simply continue in our regular line. And sometimes, just so we can show you, sometimes white will be really aggressive, and they'll even play g4 here. It's defended by the queen. At this point, we may want to consider ways that we could just be aggressive ourselves and play this pawn forward, try to trade off this pawn, right? Or we capture this pawn. It'll force them to play this move, and then we'll look for some sort of break in the center and gain in the center. Or we can play a6 and b5 and knock them back. It's going to be a really interesting game here. They've got this move coming, so we might want to play h6. It's pretty dangerous, actually, when they attack this way. It's really aggressive. But if their attack fails and they don't successfully checkmate us or hurt us, their king is wide open. And so they have to be aggressive once they play g4. And that's just something else that you may see. So it's a fun opening. There's lots to do. But the Scheveningen is really solid. The two most effective attacks against it, as we've learned, are to play the Fischer Sozin or the Keres attack, as we learned before. And you just have to know what to do against it as black, and you'll be fine. And remember, the main idea probably is to trade off the pieces and go for a winning endgame, which may not be like the sexiest approach in chess. We oftentimes just want to attack our opponent's king. But as black, when we play this, we're avoiding the regular e4, e5 openings. We're giving ourselves a chance on the queen side. And if your opponent is a very, very good Sicilian player and they get a good attack, trade off all the pieces and get a slight advantage and try to grind out a win in the endgame. If you're a strong player and you calculate well, you'll get a lot of wins as black with the Scheveningen and the Sicilian in general.